Hello everyone and welcome to Catholic Truth. In this video we are going to be debunking I Think biblically, and we've already done it once and we will do it again. But in this video we want to debunk one of his videos that says, is the Catholic Church the true church? And I was going to debunk the whole thing, but I couldn't even get through 1 minute because the errors in the first minute were so big that it kind of threw into question the rest of the video. The rest of the video wasn't even credible. I mean, he's talking about the Waldensians, who were Bible-believing Christians, except that I don't think he studied the Waldensians, because if he had, he would realize that they were Catholics. Peter Waldo, the leader, was a Catholic. He came out and was just trying to reform some corrupt clergy, but he believed in the Eucharist, baptismal regeneration, clergy, priests, and so on and so on. I mean, he, Mr. I Think Biblically, would not accept these things as biblically or doctrinally sound. Yet the Waldensians believed in these things. So this is just right at the beginning. It's hard to take anything he says seriously. But the biggest thing we're going to see is that he says that the Catholic Church can't be the true church because they hunted down and butchered millions of people, up to 50 million people, he says. According to some scholars, 50 million people. And the reason why I'm choosing to just debunk this is because this is one of the most famous anti-Catholic attacking points, where many anti-Catholics from all the top books, Fox's Book of Martyrs, The Trail of Blood, and Roman Catholicism, countless others, websites, Catholic Church killed 50 million people, 68 million people, 75 million people, 100 million people. You will hear these numbers just thrown out of the blue, that the Catholic Church just hunted down and killed 50 to 100 million people. And nobody, I don't think, very few people have ever looked at these numbers, who have ever researched these numbers to see where they come from. But they just repeat them over and over and over and over again. So in this video, we're going to show that while he might think biblically, he doesn't think historically. And we're going to show that this 50 million number that the Catholic Church supposedly killed is just wrong. Not only that, it's absurd. It's so ludicrous, it can't even be taken seriously. And I'm going to be going by two documents. They're mostly one document because both of them are about the same. But of all the documents that say this, only one, maybe two that I've seen have gone into depth to try to find out how we got the number 50 million. So that is what I'm going to be debunking in this video, to show that Mr. Biblically is incorrect. Welcome to Catholic Truth, everybody. This is Bryan Mercier. I'm the president of Catholic Truth, and we want to help you to know your faith, love it, be set on fire for it, and even be able to defend it. And if you're not Catholic, welcome. We want you to know what the Catholic Church actually believes as well, as opposed to all the myths that are out there from so many different sources. And please make sure you check out our summer fundraising campaign and support us below, and also follow us on social media below. Before I go into this, let's see what Mr. I Think Biblically says.
Roman Catholics believe that their church, the Roman Catholic Church, is the one true church. And they believe this because they claim that they can trace the succession of their popes and their bishops all the way back to Peter and the apostles. Is this true? Are they really the one true church? Absolutely not. Why do I say that? Well, because the Roman Catholic Church has hunted down, persecuted, and murdered millions of people, many of whom were Bible-believing Christians that trusted in Christ alone for salvation. If you go to, say, the 1100s, all the way through to the 1800s, you'll see that the Roman Catholic Church has killed millions. Some people estimate 50 million people in that time period.
He implies that the Catholic Church killed 50 million people from the 1100s to the 1800s, right? Now, if you look at other anti-Catholics across the board, they can't agree on this because nobody's actually researched it. Some say it's 50 million, some say it's 75, some say it's 68, some say it's 100. And some say it's from the 300s, from 350 to 1850. Some say it's just the Middle Ages. Some say it was just the Inquisitions. Literally, they're all over the map. So already their arguments are self-defeating because they themselves can't even agree on the numbers, the times, the places, or anything else. 50 million people being killed from the 1100s to the 1800s is a huge discrepancy from a 50 million being killed from 350, as this source says, to 1750. Or, as some sources say, like John Wesley, 30 million people in 40 years. 30 million people in 40 years. And yet these sources are saying 50 million in like 1200 years. So like when I say it's all over the place, it's literally all over the place. And being the curious guy that I am, I'm curious how they got these numbers. Did they go around and count all of the 50 million people one by one, or is this just pure speculation? As we're going to see, the most in-depth sources who have studied these numbers admit that nobody's tallied them up. Nobody's ever counted them, that it's literally just conjecture and guesswork. So I'm going to look at these two. In particular, one of these sources, because I think it's the most in-depth one, done by anyone that I could find in order to find this 50 million number. They go through the history of where all of these people, John Wesley and all these other people, say the numbers came from. So they go through every single one in history, and I went through it, I've read it, and I debunked it, and I don't think Mr. Biblically has done that, unfortunately. So they admit that this hasn't been added up or tallied, and it's guesswork. But we know this because no historian would ever support this. People, this is important to know. Historians, real historians, Protestants will tell you the best calculated historians have added them up and have come to the conclusion that it's 50 million. Other Protestants, like on a fundamentalist Baptist site, said that the best historians in the world have tallied these up and it came to 68 million. Others said the best historians have tallied it up and it comes to 75 million. Apparently the best historians can't even agree. But the bottom line is historians don't agree with this. They just throw these things out. And I'm actually going to be quoting historical sources in this. So let's get going. To start with, to give you an idea of how ridiculous 50 million people is, much less 68 million, 75 million, or even 100 to 120 million, all of which I've heard many times by Seventh-day Adventists and extreme anti-Catholics. But the bottom line is 50 million people. Historical sources say that the bubonic plague killed about 20 to 25 million people in Europe. Okay? 25 million, which was a third of the population of Europe. What they're saying is that the Catholic Church killed 50 million people, which is twice as many as the bubonic plague. And many of them say this happened in Europe through the 30 Years' War and the Inquisitions and things like that. So we're saying that a third of the population of Europe was wiped out through the bubonic plague, but twice that many was wiped out by the Catholic Church, which would literally leave no people in the continent of Europe. Not to mention that it's twice as many as the bubonic plague, so it would have to wipe out most of all of Europe, the majority of which was Catholic. Think about that. The majority of Europe was Catholic. So to kill the majority of Europe, you'd have to kill the majority of Catholics too. So the whole thing, by all accounts, just doesn't make sense. I mean, when you add it up, it's ludicrous. Not to mention that World War I. How many people died in World War I? They estimate about 50 million people. 25 million died and about 25 million wounded. So total, between those who were killed and wounded, we're talking 50 million people, which is the same number that they give that were just killed. But we're talking about a full world war, killing 50 million people and wounding total, combined. And we're saying that the Catholic Church just killed that many, not including all the wounded ones. Again, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. I mean, to get these kind of calculations it's preposterous. Quite frankly, there's a reason why historians, history books, encyclopedias don't even teach this, because it's never happened. At the height of the Middle Ages, the population of Europe was about 100 to 120 million. And so people say, who say, oh, it's 68 million, 100 million, you're literally saying they've wiped out the whole population. The whole population. Even people who say 50 million, that's half the population. And that was after the bubonic plague left a third of that, less than a third of that. All the calculations don't make sense. Kind of the way that I see it is that the Catholic Church would literally have to go kill every man, woman, and child in Europe, or most of them, even though half of them were Catholic, in order for these numbers to make sense. So why don't these numbers make sense? Because they're based on centuries of regurgitation, anti-Catholic slander, bias, hatred, literally conspiracy theories, all starting from people like John Wesley, who were saying that there were 30 million people killed in 40 years. 40 years! 30 million people. Now, of course, he didn't necessarily come up with these numbers, although that's what he thinks. He was just saying, oh, I've seen the numbers, or I've seen historians say, no credibility, no sources cited. It's just, this is what I've seen. This is what I've found. Nobody's found this. But John Wesley just throws out these numbers, and then someone takes it. Someone else takes that, someone else takes that, and you can see how it just spirals like a big snowball, getting bigger and bigger as it rolls down the hill. Now, this source document that was trying to get to the root of these numbers said that the majority of all of the deaths came from the 30 Years' War. This war where the Catholic Church basically just killed Protestants throughout Europe and especially in Germany. I mean, we're talking like 20 million people, millions and millions of people the Catholic Church is responsible for butchering. Now, this, of course, is just not true. I mean, if this is their best claim, that the majority of the number of 50 million comes from the 30-year war, then they're going to be sorely disappointed, and here's why. Most of the 30 Years' War was not religious. Some of it was, but the majority was political. And it happened in so many different countries with so many different powers, and even peasants just rising up against kings and trying to overthrow them, and then the kings squelching them. Protestants rising up against Catholic kings, and the Catholic kings having to put down the rebellions. Even Catholics rising up against in Protestant countries, and the Protestant, slamming those rebellions, wiping out those peasants. So many of these were just peasant uprisings and people being killed because of they're trying to overthrow the king. They're trying to take over the throne. So to say that people just were systematically hunted down by Catholics who were reading the Bible is just not based on any history whatsoever. This is the problem, though, with Protestant soundbite theology and bumper sticker apologetics. If it can fit on a soundbite and fit on a bumper sticker, then we use it. Like the Catholic Church just killed 50 million people. This is their apologetics. But where's their proof? Here's the proof. The Encyclopedia Britannica says that the 30 Years' War was fought for different reasons by different countries, different secular powers at different times. So not by the Catholic Church, not by the Pope just hunting down Bible Christians who were just innocently trying to worship Jesus. Nothing about that. No, this was political by different countries, different people, different powers, different kings at different times. This is the actual history of it, and we'll come back to this in a second. Second, this was war. I mean, it was Protestants versus Catholics. First of all, it's not necessarily a good thing, okay? I think everybody on both sides can acknowledge that. But the fact is, both sides were killing each other and rising up against each other. And war is war. Okay, there's casualties on both sides, and the historical sources say that it was pretty much split down the middle for casualties, meaning that it wasn't one side just wiping out the other, it was war and both sides had serious casualties. I mean, listen to what the New World Encyclopedia says. It says that the Swedish armies alone destroyed 2,000 castles, 18,000 villages, and 1,500 towns in Germany, which was 1/3 of all the towns in Germany. These were Protestant armies, and they wiped out 1/3 of all of the towns in Germany. Think about how much that is. 1,500 towns and 1,800 villages? How many people are there? How many people died at the hands of these Protestant Swedish armies? Okay, so this isn't just a one-sided argument here. This is a historical, unbiased source saying that Sweden turned literally a 30-year war, which was an internal conflict, into an entire continental war. So this was really big, okay? And this is admitted by historians, encyclopedias, and history books. But destroying 1,500 towns in Germany led to millions more dying because of the people who didn't have enough food to eat, diseases which went rampant, and many other things that took place because of the consequences of these wars. Millions and millions of people died in the 30 Years' War that had nothing to do with the war itself, like the actual killing, but was from famine and diseases and outbreaks and things like that. But people don't talk about that. What Protestants do is they They coagulate, they lump together all of these numbers and say, this is how many people total. 20 million people died during the 30 Years' War, and the Catholic Church killed them all. Like literally, it's insanity. It doesn't even make sense. But honest historians have said that the numbers were on both sides. Protestant kings were guilty. Catholic kings were guilty. Both sides were guilty. Uprisings were guilty. I mean, all around, a lot of it was political in nature. People trying to overthrow other kings, and then they didn't want those kings to get popular, so others came into the war. Nobody takes this into the consideration when they just say 50 million people were killed. They don't take into the disease or any of these other things. It was just literally, I've read these websites, it just says the Catholic Church killed all of these people, or 20 million people died, when in fact, it's not even close. Most sources estimate that because of the war, strictly due to the war, 8 million people died. Millions of others died because of famine and starvation and disease and things like that. But 8 million people. That's the rough estimate. And if you don't believe me, the World Encyclopedia says 8 million. History Channel says 8 million. Clark Science Center, 8 million. HistoryMaps.com, 4 to 8 million, and so on and so on and so on. Not 20, not 30, not 40, not the majority of the 50 million. No, 4 to 8 million. Most people say about 8 million. And those were split down the middle because it's war, and you had about an even amount of deaths on both sides. So we're talking about 2 to 4 million people that the Catholic Church killed. And if the 50 million number, the majority of that came from the 30 Years' War, how do we get that when only 2 to 4 million people, according to historical sources, were killed by the Catholic Church during these times, during this war? And we're talking not even the church sometimes, just political powers. 2 to 4 million. Even if we said 8 million, even if we just gave all the 8 million to the Catholics, that's not the majority of 50 million. None of it adds up and none of it makes sense. A lot of this is just complete mythology, slander, and hyperbole. It doesn't take into account that many of these original armed rebellions were started by Protestants. Many of them were started by Protestants, not Catholics. For him just to throw out the number, 50 million people died, many historians say. Therefore, the Catholic Church can't be the true church. This is literally slanderous hyperbole. It's not looking at the facts. And it's just saying, oh, the Catholic Church is wrong because of this. Can you see how complicated this is? How much more in depth it is? And how Mr. Biblically can't be honest about this and just throw out these numbers. That's why the Encyclopedia Britannica says this, that for the 30 Years' War in European history, it was a series of wars fought by various nations for various reasons, including religious, dynastic, territorial, and commercial rivalries. Does that sound like the Catholic Church hunted down Bible Christians who were just trying to worship Jesus and hunted down Christians just for reading the Bible? This is the Protestant narrative. Not Protestant narrative, because many Protestants don't believe this, and many Protestants would never say this. I should say the Protestant anti-Catholic narrative. Like Seventh-day Adventists, Fundamentalist Baptists, Evangelicals, many people who hate the Catholic Church throw these numbers out, but they can't be substantiated, and I hope that you can see that. Historians estimate that even if you add in all of the diseases, starvation, famine, all of these things combined together, it's only between about 5 to 18 million people who died. Now that's 18 million's on the very high side, okay? Let's say it's 18 million, okay? 9 million is split in half. That's 50% because it's war. So we're assuming 50% died on each side. That's 9 million. How, pray tell, does this most in-depth Protestant source say that the majority of the 50 million lives that have died come from the 30 Years' War? 9 million is not even half of 50 million. Not even close. It's like, not even close. So how does that account for the majority of the lives? And if it's not the majority of the lives, then where are the other ones coming? We're talking about a minuscule number now. and it doesn't even come close to 50 million. Some people will say, yes, but they were butchered during the Inquisition. If you take the hundreds of years that the Catholic Popish Inquisitions happened, we're talking tens of millions of people died. This is the Protestant anti-Catholic narrative, and I need you guys to understand how outlandish it is. Catholics out there, this is going to be quoted to you so many times, so you need to know this. Most Protestants don't even accept this. In fact, this book here that I have right here on display is called Bearing False Witness, Debunking Centuries of Anti-Catholic History. Well, if you Catholics read books other than Catholic books, oh, wait, stop. This isn't a Catholic book. This is by a Protestant historian who just goes by the facts. And he shows that millions and millions of people were not killed during the time of the Inquisition, not even tens of thousands. And in fact, Rodney Stark, and we've had him on our channel before, we've interviewed him if you want to see his own words for himself, but he says the centuries of Protestant anti-Catholic slander need to stop, especially in regard to the Inquisition, and especially because of the last age of research. We have the best, most prestigious research right now about the Inquisition. Why? Because after long last, the secret Vatican archives were finally opened, and the Pope and the Vatican let historians just go roam through them and see what they could find. And we found that the inquisitors who did the Inquisitions were not only brilliant and rational and logical, we found out that they kept meticulous records, down to the last letter records. And they have records of every single thing they did. So when we look at the records of the Inquisitions, and we're talking actual, like, prestigious worldwide historians have done this who aren't Catholic. Like, for example, I mean, there's several, but Henry Common is just one of them. And he writes Spanish Inquisition, a historical revision, because he, like Rodney Stark and many others, Edwards, who go through the Vatican archives and they've literally changed the centuries of Protestant slander that have been done against the Catholic Church. And again, not Catholic, worldwide reputed historian who has gone through there. And these historians, whether it's Rodney Stark or Common or Edwards or others, they say that it's only roughly about 2,000 people died during the Inquisitions. One historian says about 3,000, and this includes people who were just in jail and died in there or from starvation or something else, but only about 2,000, not 20,000, not 2 million, not 20 million, and certainly not 50 to 68, 75, or 100 million. I mean, this is since the time of John Wesley and the Protestant reformers slandering the Catholic Church, which was one of their greatest weapons. They were talking about whole towns being bathed in Protestants. Literally, rivers of blood were flowing because so many people were butchered on a given day, and every day that rivers of blood were flowing. I mean, if you it's hard to say with a straight face. It's hard to say, and it's hard to even think of in a logical way, because that didn't even happen with World War I, which we talked about, or the bubonic plague, or other events that happened even far more so. I saw one site that said between 1540 and 1700, only 44,701 cases from the Inquisition were heard. Heard, meaning they looked into 44,000 cases. So if there were only 44,000 cases heard, then how could 50 million people be killed? How could 30, 20, or even 10, or even 1 million be killed when 1 million, there weren't even 1 million cases? Can you see how the numbers don't add up? Can you see how people might just repeat these things over and over and over again without actually researching them? How they might be slandering other people and hating other people without looking at the facts first. The facts of history are so much different than the slanderous accusations by anti-Catholics who are just regurgitated, by the way. They don't actually look them up or fact check them. They just pass them on and say this is what it is. Like I think biblically, for example. So you can see the difference between what Protestants, anti-Catholics say about Catholicism. We killed millions of people in the Inquisitions, versus historians who say that it was only about 2,000. And people will say, yes, but they killed them for heresy because they were Bible-believing Christians. First of all, nobody was killed just merely for reading a Bible. I mean, that's just not even true. Not even Tyndale or others. I mean, that's just a myth that's been repeated endlessly. And people were not being killed just for believing in Jesus. That's also a myth. That doesn't even make sense. And this doesn't take into account that there were Protestant and secular inquisitions. These most prestigious authors in the world, historians in the world, say that it wasn't millions of people, it was only about 2,000, and this was less, far less than the secular and Protestant inquisitions. Yes, both had inquisitions as well. And in fact, the Protestant inquisitions were very deadly, and if you just disagreed with someone, if you just disagreed with their opinion, you were considered a heretic many times and you were put to death. You received the death penalty. So it wasn't just Catholics who believed this. It was everyone across the board who believed that heresy deserved the death penalty. And of course, there's a biblical basis for this as well. But the fact that Catholics are persecuted for, killing heretics, when Protestants did the same thing, how can Protestants say that Catholics did that and ignore the fact that Protestants did it, and more so? And in fact, just look at the life of John Calvin and Zwingli and Luther, who persecuted and put to death countless Anabaptists just because they believed in adult rebaptism, which they thought was heresy. And not to mention the line of people that John Calvin killed, including Michael Servetus, not to mention people that just insulted him or said that his work wasn't good. He would not only kill them, one guy, he burned down his house and put his wife on the lawn to watch it. And Martin Luther took full responsibility for wiping out 100,000 peasants. Not 2,000, like the Inquisition, 100,000 peasants. Even Protestant scholars say that that's a huge black mark on the Protestant record. The fact is, there are so many lynchings, killings, burnings, drownings among the Protestants on other Protestants, mostly against other Protestants, ironically, because they were disagreeing with each other. And this isn't even to take into account other things like the witch hunts or the Salem witch trials, which were by far and away the vast majority all Protestant. Why? Because as we've learned about the Inquisitions, they were fair, rational trials. People would even blaspheme in secular courts so they could get transferred to the Catholic courts and receive a fair trial. And we weighed all the information. We let people who were said to be guilty go because they were found to be innocent. And because of our fair trials, once the witch hunts came around and total mass hysteria, even among all throughout Protestantism, the Catholic Church still had a logical, rational, fact-based trial system, which kept many, many people from dying who were in fact innocent. They were accused as guilty and witches, but because of the fair trials, because there had to be witnesses, because of all of these things, hardly anybody did in the Catholic world, as opposed to the hysteria, mass killings in the Protestant world. These are the facts that we need to know, Catholics. These are the things that we need to know. If you need to rewind this video and get the facts, write them all down, because you're going to hear these things again and again and again. And this is why we exist here at Catholic Truth, to help you to know what the truth is and what the truth is not. And even all the countless non-Catholics who watch our channel by the truckloads. There are so many people, even Jehovah's Witness elders, Protestant pastors, all watch our channel. And it's to help you know and hopefully be able to sort fact from fiction, to show you that what people say about the Catholic Church is most times not even true. And many times we should be fact-checking our sources. If we hear something, oh, the Catholic Church killed 50 million people, 100 million people, we should look this up. We shouldn't just say it and then slander others by just repeating it without looking it up. So it's very dangerous. And that's why we made this video. And I couldn't even get to the rest of, I think, Biblically's video, because the first two things he said straight out of the gate were just completely erroneous, completely absurd. And I can't even trust the rest of the video. If he can't even get the basic historical facts right about the Waldensians and 50 million people actually dying, I can't trust the rest of anything he has to say historically. I may go back and debunk the rest of the video, but I think this was an important one that needed to be dealt with. If you love this video and you found it so helpful, then please do us a favor and share it. Please comment, please like it, please. All of these things help to get the videos more popular. So Google sees them and says, hey, we like these things. And of course, people will thumb down the video too. But the bottom line is Google loves, the interactions of comments and watch time and all this other stuff. So please share it on as many social media platforms as possible so we can get the truth out there that sets people free. And if you want to follow us for daily inspiration, then please see our Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and all the rest down below. And if you can support our summer campaign, we need 50 people giving $25 a month, new donors. And I want to thank all the donors who have recently donated, especially a $1,000 donation, $500, $300, $200. A lot of people are starting to give during our campaign. And we have met we're up to like 5%, and maybe 10% now out of our 100% goal for our summer campaign. And we need so much money during these summer months because it's so hard for nonprofits during summer. So please, if you love our work and you like what we do and you realize that these videos take literally countless hours to make and a heck of a lot of money, then please support this cause. Monthly, preferably, but if you want to give a one-time donation, periodic, we would love that too. But thank you all for watching. We hope this has helped you, and we hope that you'll check out our other videos if you want to know the Catholic faith. God bless you.